Test. Test.
All right, are you guys ready?
Yes.
Welcome. My name is Matt Schneider. I'm the co-founder of City Dads Group. Our effort to build communities of dads across the United States and now in Canada. We opened our Toronto Dads Group, so we're global. Thank you to the members of NYC Dads Group that came out tonight and the folks at Meetup for coming out. And thanks to everybody who is watching online. Thanks especially to the team at Meetup that has helped us put this together, and the team at the Malala Fund who reached out to us and asked if we want to do something like this. And every now and then around Father's Day, all the stars align to make something like this happen. I always say I never know what's going to be in my inbox on any given day. When your team reached out, they asked if we might be interested in sitting down with you. I've been following your family for many, many years. Certainly your daughter's story struck a chord with all of us. And you have been by her side during her recovery, during her acceptance of a Nobel Peace Prize, and certainly your work together over the years. And then you wrote a book and got to tell a little bit about your own story and the beautiful partnership that you have with your wife. And how you're raising your daughter and your sons. So yeah, we wanted to sit down with you. And right around this time, a good buddy of mine announced his new book. Similar themes, as you'll see. Raising empowered daughters. He's one of the smartest people I know, especially about how straight, white guys like us are still keeping things from women and people of color and the LGBTQ community. So his book is really a primer on all the ways we continue to do that. Both books are for sale after, if you'd like to pick them up. I love both. Thank you for writing them. Excuse me. I want to jump in with kind of your background, the backstory about how you became who you are. Ziauddin, you wrote in your book that as a teenage boy, 13, 14 years old, you were being groomed to be an extremist, radicalized by your Islamic instructor. For a short period of time, you were ready to be a martyr. Tell us a little bit about that time, if you will, and how you could possibly change course.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, thank you, Mike, and thank you, everyone here. Yes, so I grew up in a small village in the northwest of Pakistan, and it is a hilly area, a lot of mountains, tall mountains. If you just look up and you have a cape on your head, it will fall down. So it was a small community, and I had 5 sisters and a brother, and my family was a very patriarchal family, being the part of a patriarchal society. And I could see that inequality within the family, like I was surrounded with more pair of shoes, more clothes, nicer food, and I had been sent to school while my 5 sisters had not this opportunity. I will not blame my parents because, like society, the government was also patriarchal, and it is still patriarchal. There were many schools for boys, but hardly any school for the girls. Coming to your question, like at that time, it was like Cold War between Soviet Union and, which is called USSR, and United States. They wanted to come to the warm water, and here people wanted to stop them. And this Cold War was a really, really very hot war for our region. And that war was fought not on nationalism. It was fought on the ideology of Islam. Like people, think tanks in USA, together with their lobby in Pakistan, they launched this Cold War in Afghanistan for their strategic goals. And as the base of the war was on ideology, so they radicalized and jihadized everything. So that was the context when I was taught by a mosque clerk, a Maulana. He radicalized me so much that I started praying to God, oh Allah, let there be a fight between the Muslims and non-Muslims and let me be killed. I was still peaceful. I didn't want to kill anyone. I wanted to be a martyr myself. So that was the situation where many youth, many young people like me who went astray and who lost their way due to that ideology. So, I mean, I should not speak that long. Mike is here. I should have the opportunity to him. Thank you so much. So that was the circumstances which made me so. And luckily, then Turpekai's brother, he was in a very democratic, secular party, like he was in politics, and I became like his student. So he gave me a different angle of life, that yes, there is another world, but this world is so much important. And then I used to pray to God after 1 year that, oh God, let me live long and I want to live for myself and my family and for everyone.
So you had a mentor that.
Yes, you find mentors, not always in parents or in teachers. You find mentors somewhere in like elders, family, extended family. And I was lucky that I came across such people. But my windows were open to other thoughts and ideologies. Once people are indoctrinated in a way that they become the part of a cult, then it's very difficult.
You also talk a lot about in the book about noticing the women in your family, recognizing the roles of your mother and your sisters, like you said, and a cousin that was in a bad marriage.
Yeah.
And you also talk about working with some of the women that couldn't read.
Yeah, exactly. I
Reading
loved it.
letters.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, that was like I could see this inequality and women and girls being marginalized because of patriarchy. And it's men's society, like men determine everything. And that was the reason that none of my 5 sisters went to school. And they even could not dream beyond becoming wives and mothers. And the same was the case with the family of Torpeka. She had 5 sisters, and none of them could go to school. And she also left school. She went for 2-3 weeks sometime, and she says that she was quite a naughty girl. Like naughty means teasing other boys. And then she was very young. And then she got bored, and she left the school, and nobody asked her that why she left her school. So I could see that discrimination and marginalization. And later on, education changed me. It transformed me into the kind of person that I became. And I tell that education made my inner being fair, just, and beautiful. So, as it changed me, so I became more conscious about these inequalities and discrimination. I was very angry seeing my first cousin bound in a forced marriage, and she could not come out of it because of the social taboos. So that was my early memories, and how then I changed, and I wanted to stand for women and girls' rights. And later on, I became a father as well. So, yeah.
When you were also writing letters for these women who
Yeah.
were
Okay.
illiterate.
The interesting thing is, I forgot your question. Sorry. So I was very like, it was my first volunteer work. Like being educated and having school. I mean, in New York, it's a usual thing. It's like uh, it is a social norm or something you see, but it was very rare in my community. So I was one of the few educated young boys and old ladies whose sons were working as laborers in Gulf countries. So at that time, I mean, no mobile, no social media, no nothing. So they used to send mails by post. And when they used to invite me to come and read it, oh my God. When I used to read it, the expression on their faces, the reflection of happiness, sometime of sadness, and then writing the responses, like the replies for them. It was my first work as a volunteer. So I really loved that. And I was feeling that education is empowering me because if I had not been educated, I won't have been able to serve these old ladies whose sons are not at home and they're abroad.
But you're also, I would think, getting some insight into these ladies' experience and their view of the world, and that perhaps.
Yeah, their view of the world is very narrow, to be honest. Narrow means that they like they think now that things are changing, but at that time that was their world, like waiting for their sons to send some money and taking care of the children like a grandma, and that's it, like very like living and partly living. That was it. Their joys were very limited. Their space was very limited. But at least I was like serving them, so it was a happiness for me to do that. Yeah.
All right, our friend Mike, you and I are about the same age. We're both brought up in the American culture. Men are men. There's one definition of what it means to be a real man. People call it the man box. I don't like to call it toxic masculinity. Our friend Mark Green taught me the man box is a good term for it. Talk a little bit about your upbringing and what led you to start questioning the way that American boys are brought up and how you were brought up.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you to Meetup and Matt for hosting us. And I'm going to be as brief as possible because I greatly enjoyed listening to you and hearing that. And I read Let Them Fly, and I urge everyone here to buy it, and I hope you'll be kind enough to sign it. It's just an extraordinary book that really teaches dads. The message I got from it was that we can do a small thing that has global consequences. And it's just a profound message that it might not always lead to that, but it's something that changes your culture for the better. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I think you might call it a typical white suburban household, a mom, a dad, 3 brothers, and things kind of went off track when I was 12, and I became raised by a single mom, and that really helped inform kind of how I saw the world and challenges that she went through as she went back to school and went into teaching and became the first person in our family to earn a master's degree. So kudos to Mom. She was a wonderful example of hard work and perseverance and the power of education, really, to change families for the better. Because she certainly changed our family for the better, really saved it. And so I saw that and realized that the message that dads got at the time, this is maybe 1984, was that parenting was for moms. There was literally a movie, Mr. Mom. If dad's going to be a parent, he's going to become a mom. And that was in my brain, speaking of indoctrination. It's a little a little more slippery here in America, but it still happens. And so I knew that I was good with kids, and I was a carer and a nurturer, and that I wanted to stay home. And when my wife and I had a daughter in 2006, we chose the role that I would stay home and care for Emmy while my wife went back to work. And that really helped to also inform how I saw that the world was shaped and sort of tilted in a way for her that was different than my experience as a child and as a man, and really helped inform my own education going forward and studying and reading about gender bias in America and globally, and wanted to write some family books to help dads really get involved in the everyday life with their children and their families, and eventually led to raising empowered daughters. So thank you for being here to listen to it.
For many men, fatherhood seems to be this epiphany moment where they start thinking, especially if they have a daughter, they start to think differently, and they start sentences like, as a father of a daughter. Why do you think fatherhood brings us to this point where we think about things differently, where we couldn't think about our mothers or our wives or our sisters in the same way?
That's such an excellent question, and it's not only thinking about our wives and our mothers and our women in our lives, but it's women in general. What is it about having a daughter that's so transformational, or having a child that's so transformational? It's a profound life event for many people. And I think it was sociologist Michael Kimmel, he wrote a book about Guyland, which talks about indoctrination into white supremacist groups here in the United States and how to pull men from that. He had said that for many men, we just don't see it. It's not our reality, gender bias, patriarchy, until maybe we have a daughter. And then that's our way in. And I would like to say that maybe we get in sooner. We go outside and we see that the sky is blue, that we live in a patriarchy, but we often don't. And having a child really kind of gives us a sense that things might be different for them, that they just weren't for us.
We framed this conversation about raising children, and all three of us are in partnerships that we're raising our children with someone else. So I want to dig a little bit into the partnerships you each have with your wives. Ziauddin, in your chapter about your wife, Torpakai, who is here tonight, you titled it "Wife and Best Friend." It's really beautiful. She's stood out of the spotlight for the most part, but she's of course a central part, central role in your family, and of course your story and Malala's story. Could you talk a little bit about the partnership that you have developed, going back to the beginning?
Yeah, so I told you that living in a small community where there was a complete segregation, the only girls and women I met were my sisters and my mother and aunts. So Torpeke was the first girl in my life. She used to come to my uncle's home, and we had this exchange of looking at one another and got infatuated. We don't have any dates in Pakistan like in the rural areas. Maybe in big towns it happens now. But love is such a beautiful communication that it doesn't need language. You just look at one another and people have experienced, all of you almost. Anyway, so I was very impressed because I had, at that time, I had this complex kind of inferiority that I'm dark in color and my nose is very big, and I don't know whether I would be liked by any girl in my life. And she was the first girl and became the last girl who took interest in me. I was a little famous as an intelligent and a very able boy in the school, though I was not, but people were. I became famous for my speeches in spite of my stammering. And she took interest in me, and then this is how this, I didn't know that how wise she was. Her beauty attracted me. And then I asked my father, long story, but anyway, a day came that we became like wife and husband and equal partners of life. And then I discovered that the woman who I just married, because she was very beautiful, she has an amazing wisdom. She is treasure of wisdom. And it was a journey that I discovered the power of a woman. And men in patriarchal societies, they most often the men who like consult their wives on business issues, on serious issues, they are considered weak and meek and like not very brave men, okay? But I had such a belief in her wisdom that whenever I came across any problem, serious problems in my life, the first person I would go to, and I went to was Torpekai. And she always advised me in the best way. So she's the power behind me, Malala, and in the difficult times of Taliban, trust me, if she had not been there, and if she had not supported both of us, you won't have seen any Ziauddin and any Mama Malala. Because she was the one, if she had stopped me, that please don't do this activism and campaign for education. After all, a wife is wife. I mean, it's a family. But she used to say, okay, please speak up. I wish to speak up, but I don't have this training of speaking to the people. So if you can, please speak up. Stand for your rights. So she's the real power.
And you were both raised in this very conservative type. Everybody should clap for
So I like the interesting thing is, Mike, that we both grew up in a patriarchal family. And together we had this very beautiful understanding that we created and built an egalitarian family. So our family, the way we treated one another, like wife and husband, husband and wife, the respect which we give to each other. Like when she got married, she had like patriarchal dealing by my nephews and my brother and people in the family. And I gave a clear-cut message to everyone that if you respect me, you have to respect her. Otherwise, unacceptable, unacceptable. And that message was so powerful that then people didn't take care of me that much, but they used to take care of her. So this is how, like, we didn't write on the walls that equality is important and girls and boys are equal. It was through action. So as we say, actions speak louder than words. And this is how we are very proud of our two sons. They are feminist boys. This is the social norm of their life. It's their value of life. Yeah.
Can we hold a little space
Please.
for a second about, can you tell the story about the picture? I think when you went to England and you had her, you sent her a picture and she had to send it back, is that right?
Yeah, no, it was in Pakistan, basically. Okay. It was the beginning of our, I can't say love affair, but it was the beginning of our understanding one another. And I sent a picture through my nephew. But she was very wise, that is why. She told me, no, picture will not work. You should ask my hand, like properly. Send someone to ask my hand. This will not work, that you will send picture and I will send picture. She was serious. Yeah.
I thought it was a great part of the book.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.
Both of you talk about how important kind of starting at home is. What was the impact? It sounds like you were totally outside the norm. Neither of you grew up in families within an egalitarian relationship, but it sounds like you decided you were going to treat each other equally. What was the impact on the people outside your family?
Yeah, like in the beginning, some of the people like just raised their eyebrows what they are doing, like especially I was doing. But later on, they knew that this is the way of life. And as I told you, they were convinced that this is the right way of life. So now I see the similar freedom among other families who are nearby us. Like my father, this is one big example. He did not take any interest in his daughters' like education or thinking for them beyond marriages. But the same person, when he was very old, he was a very handsome man with his gray beard. And Malala was like, he died in 2007, so she was very young in school, in like a toddler, maybe in grade 3, 4. And looking at my love and my fondness for my daughter and my keenness about her education, my father, like, he became very fond of his granddaughter. Like he loved her. And when he used to come to our home, he used to ask, oh, okay, how are your grades in the exam? And this time you stood second in class. This is not good. I want to use always stand first. And how was your position in speech? So I was so happy. Like this was a big change for me. Like the man who never thought of his 5 daughters was taking keen interest in his granddaughter's education and achievements.
I hope everyone's taking notes. Start in your own home, and the impact is amazing. Mike, your wife, like mine, is a rock star, lawyer, I believe, and an equestrian, and amazing mother. I've not ever met her. I just learned all this on Facebook. Talk a little bit about your wife and the conversations that you guys had, even before having children. My wife and I, my wife is here, we started talking about what our life would look like before we got married, before we had children. What were you guys talking about as you thought about how you'd want to potentially have kids and how you'd want to raise them?
Yes, she is an accomplished equestrian. In fact, she has a show Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'm looking forward to getting the text of how it's all going. My daughter as well. It's just their jam. They do that together, and it's really quite extraordinary. So I was a newspaper reporter for a long time, and my wife was a high-powered mergers and acquisitions lawyer. Any money that I made would go straight to childcare. I had always been a caring and nurturing person, and so we had a conversation that, maybe it felt right for me to stay home. Economics had a lot to do with it, but it is a discussion that we had. And it was just a continuing conversation of how we want to form our family life, and it's a conversation that continues, through age 1 up to 13 today, and it's a never-ending conversation that just constantly evolves. And I'm really grateful for dad groups like this to, I think it was Lance, one of the founders, that said, I needed a veteran maybe who had been through it before to talk about the challenges that I'm facing. So we'd talk as a family, and I would go to my dad groups and also get a little support as well. And so I think that was really important, especially for men who aren't necessarily seen as the competent father. More and more we're being seen as the father who's there, and I think there might be a media narrative that says there's the bumbling father. You might see in TV commercials, a young guy, he's 20, he's selling cars or cologne, and he looks like a CIA spy, but you give that guy a child, and in those commercials, he can't make toast. It's like, how is that possible? So we had talks about what my role was gonna be and what her role was gonna be and how we just make it work throughout the years, and we're still trying our best.
You talk through the book, or you tell some stories from the book, kind of observing the experience your wife has out in the world, hearing her stories. What are some things that you've learned from her, some stories that have informed your work in writing this book?
I'd like to say that a lot of them are empowering and are things that really helped me move forward in an empowering way, but really a lot of it were things that were simply not my reality and that I did not know existed. How much emotional weight that she has to carry from a simple business conversation where 2 men might be arguing on the phone and it's just a heated argument, and as she speaks and someone says, whoa, 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 stop your bickering. That's a very gendered term that I don't think a lot of the guys knew that they were saying. And she has to suddenly weigh in that moment and in future moments, how much anger can I let out? Is it gonna risk my job? So there are things like that that really informed this book, and wanted to kind of act as a medium, I guess, for relaying those stories. There's data about representation in business, in media, in sports, but I really wanted to get underneath that and tell the stories as much as I could about things like that, things that don't really affect us and maybe we perpetuate, but just don't have to carry the emotional weight of. And so that's something I really wanted to bring forward.
Let's turn to, we're going to talk about raising sons, we're going to talk about raising daughters, but let's start with daughters. Malala, of course, is a unique gift to the world. It sounds like she was recognized as a unique gift to the world from day one. My favorite quote of yours is behind us. Whenever anybody has asked me how Malala became who she is, I've often used the phrase, ask me not what I did, but what I did not do. I did not clip her wings. Could you talk a little bit about Malala and what you hope people will take from that quote?
Yes, I love this quote. I generally don't like everything I say, but I love it. This is the only quote I love.
I'm glad
And
I
the
picked
only
it.
thing I did, and I did not do so. I did something that okay. You got it. The reason is like, I see that in patriarchal societies and the societies where there is religious extremism, there is very little space for girls. And they are not accepted as individuals and human beings with their own identity. They are known by fathers or sons or by husbands. And I was very clear from the day one, even before she was born, that if I'm a father of a daughter, she will have her own name. She will have her own identity. I never saw my mother's name on a doctor's prescription. I tell this story to many people. And if I took my mother to the doctor used to write mother of Ziauddin. And if my father accompanied her, she became wife of Ruhul Amin. So I was not accepting this invisibility or this absence of the identity. That's why I named Malala after the legendary, well-known Afghan heroine Malala Yousafzai. I meant it because she had her own identity and she raised her voice in a very difficult time. And also, when my cousin brought me the family tree a few days after Malala was born, and I looked at the family tree, excuse me, so it was a long list of men traced back for 400 years. And what I did, I picked up my pen, drew a line from my name, and wrote Malala. So I wanted her to be her. I didn't know that I will be known by her name. Like once she was my daughter, and now I'm her father. I'm proud of it. It's great. But what I wanted, it was for her that she will be somebody in her own capacity. And how, like, the first thing I didn't know that I, like all other fathers, are brothers and sons who, like men who do in the community, they stop their female they become a barrier for them. They can't move forward because of this male chauvinism or patriarchy. I just did not clip her wings and I let her fly. And the second thing, like as a father, I personally think that fatherhood, in many places, it is considered as like authority or like control, power. But for me, fatherhood means a kind and compassionate, lovely mentorship. Like you only not tell your children, but they also tell you. I learned a lot from my kids as a father. And I tell people that our children fix us if we give them space and we are open to change. Because our children are future people. Khalil Gibran has beautifully said that your children are not your children. Your sons and daughters are, uh, are your sons and daughters are life's longing in itself. So I didn't shackle my children with my past, rather than I wanted them to be the children of future. And this is how they are smarter than us. I will tell two stories about my children. One is when Malala was moving from home to Oxford. So she had all her education in all girls' schools. In Pakistan, we had a separate campus for girls in my school, which I started. And when we moved to the UK, she was in Boston High School for girls, so it was all girls school. And now she was moving to LMH College, Oxford, 2.5 years ago. And she asked me, maybe she was teasing me. She's very cheeky as well. She asked me that, okay, Abba, you know that I had been in girls' school in Pakistan and now in girls' school in UK, and now I'm moving to Oxford, and you know they are boys, like it's a co-education. And I may be inviting people from fund and other organization. There will be men. By the way, what do you think about it? And after a pause, like even liberal fathers have a little bit patriarchy. It's difficult. To be honest, Mike, it is difficult. It is always difficult. And that old patriarchal Ziauddin, it sometimes pops up and I push him down. It is a lifelong struggle, okay? But I'm clear, at least. And after a pause, I told Jani, I can't hear Jani. Jani means soulmate. Jani, I trust you. And you know what did she say? She told me, don't trust me. And it was enough for me. Like, I learned from her because I knew that she's fixing me now. She's fixing the patriarchal, old, dying father in me, which is still breathing. And I say, okay, fine. I'm done, you're right. I don't trust you, whatever you want to do it. So, our children are smarter, really. And I told you, it's getting longer. Okay. Okay. My younger son, this is what I want to make a point that we learn from our children if we are open to it. That's the condition. My younger son, Atal, so one day, he's very smart. He told me that the title of your book is not good. Let her fly. Why let her fly only? Let them fly. Let everyone fly. I said, okay, it has a context, but if you say I agree, it's fine. And one day we were just, so I'm not good in computer and social media, and so it's a very funny story. And I was copying, and I wanted to copy and paste something. So I just clicked on copy, and then I gave the phone to him. And he said that, okay, I'm pasting. And I said, no, it's on my fingertip. Can you believe it? And he said, no, don't think so. It is copied now, and I will paste it. So, I mean, okay, that's fine. Yeah, it was weird, okay.
Mike, your daughter Emmy is exceptional as well. Ziauddin says he didn't clip Malala's wings. How did Emmy become who she is?
Emmy is an incredible, empowering, wonderful child. She doesn't yet have a Nobel Prize, but we'll get there. No, there's a wonderful book called Enough as She Is, and I think really, clearly, very truly, we need to hold space for girls to not strive so much for an anxiety-ridden life where they're just on the track to, president. I think that's too prevalent in our American culture today. So we're all, she is, our children are, they're enough as they are. They're doing okay, and they're going to be fine. And one of the things that I saw a nice little parallel between our books, the simple act of listening, and it's something maybe I struggle with at home as well, but providing that space, that warm, welcoming environment that allows kids to find themselves, to have agency, and get a sense that their dreams matter, that the things they want to do matter, the worries and fears and angers and frustrations and everything that makes us full, valued human beings, that all matters. So there's the first transgender woman to be elected to a state legislature, and open transgender woman. There was unfortunately one that was outed in the 70s who didn't want to be, but the first woman to run as a transgender candidate and win was Danica Rome, and she provided some great advice that we need to check in with our kids and let them know that they've got a warm, welcoming, equitable home life to grow up in. And that's one of the things that I really liked about the book, about your book. There was a great quote from Malala in the foreword that said, and I'm not remembering quite off the top of my head, but it was something to the effect of, my dad listened, and he made me feel powerful, and he made me feel, that my words mattered. And I think that's something that we can all replicate at home. And that's one of the major points of the book is giving that warmth and space and the feeling that these girls in our lives, whether our own or the collective village of them, they don't need to be ours. We might think that patriarchy exists in some foreign place, but I'm thinking of, I'm a mister. You might be a miss or a Mrs., depending on your relation to a man. That's still very prevalent in America as well. We still get together, groups of men who make up less than 50% of the population and roughly 75% of government representation. We get together and decide that we can vote on health care for women, and that's a socially acceptable thing. And women die because of some of these votes. So patriarchy is not a far-off land. We need to make a warm home life and listen to our kids, our boys especially, and our girls, and let them find their whole selves and do our part as well, not just send them off into the patriarchy and say, hey, we hope you're empowered and feeling great. Good luck out there. We need to do our part as dads to tear down the patriarchy a little bit from within, and I think we can do that by having conversations like this, dad to dad. Maybe not necessarily, dads who would show up to an event to talk about involved fatherhood, but maybe our buddies. And it's very simple, small things that do change, from your father being more accepting.
Yeah, exactly.
It's small things like that that do change our personal cultures for the better.
Can you talk a little bit more about the work that you would like to see dads doing? And this dad to dad is not just you as a dad to us, it's also the work that dads need to be doing between each other to help not only our daughters, not only our mothers and sisters and wives, but all women.
There's a really cool thing that dads can do, and it's speak up to your buddies when they're being horrible. Sometimes we are, and sometimes they are, but we can kind of create our social circles and make them more equitable. I think of an anecdote from this book. There's a woman, a friend of mine in Texas, who brought her kids to a Texas football game, American football game. And they were handing out flyers for something, and she had her daughter and some Girl Scout friends, and her son, who was a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout at the time. And he was greeted by all the passersby as, well, hello, little mister. What's your Eagle Scout project going to be? How are you doing? Thanks so much for being out here. Of the 4 girls, 2 were called bitches. 2 were sexually harassed by grown men. They were 11 and 9. They were called Sweetie and Honey. And the thing is, this is a group of men, one in particular that was really bad. There were 4 men in this group, and 2 of them did the harassing. The other 2 just sat by and laughed. We can be the guy that laughs, or we can be the dad, the man in that group that says, hey, Bob, shut up. These are kids. That's something concrete we can do. We can stop letting that stuff slide. And that's important, because now Bob knows he can't be that horribly sexist to little children who have to carry the weight of being sexually harassed for the rest of their lives, certainly through the rest of that day.
Ziauddin, you're the father of 2 teenage boys as well, Kushal and Atal. You write a lot in the book about them and some of the challenges and the differences between raising Malala and raising the 2 boys. It sounds like Kushal especially was has been a little challenging along the way. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the difference and how your approach and how you think about your daughter versus your sons?
Yeah, so I, like comparatively to our daughter, I had more difficulty in raising my sons. Maybe your experience is the same or different, I don't know, but I had a different experience with the boys. Especially when we moved from Pakistan to UK, so it was a very big cultural change. I was expecting my sons, to some extent, to be as obedient as I was to my father and obeying, and they had this open society, open culture, and they used to hear good things in school, and then also this what that is called games tools like Xbox. So Khushal was very busy on Xbox, and my younger son has PS Vita thing. And they were more about those games and things, and I got frustrated because I wanted them to learn and to study and to read. And Khushal was very angry with me, and I was also angry with him. Uh, so really it was difficult in the beginning, but when I just got kind of very disappointed, so um, we had a doctor in the UK who became a friend of our family. Coincidentally, she was in Pakistan when Malala was attacked, and then she came with her together to the UK. And it's a long story, but that doctor is a family friend, and she is like the godmother of my sons. Then I just called her and I told her that I'm in trouble. So I'm telling this story that if parents fail somewhere, they can benefit from the close family, friends. And when I just sat with her and I told my problem, she told me, don't worry, he's a teenager, he will be fine. Just be patient, don't get angry, he will be okay. And then she had many sittings with him. He used to take both my sons out, took them to cinema or mini golf, and really that changed my son. Now we are best friends, really. Khushal is best friend of mine, and whatever problem he faces, I am the first person he tells me, not his mother, sometime. And like day before yesterday, he called me, and he told me that this, like parenthood and fatherhood, it's an everyday effort, and our children needs different type of parenthood in different ages. So Khushal, my older son, who is just taking his A levels final exams, and he called me on phone from UK with a choked voice, like almost crying, and he said, "Oh, you are doing so much for me, and like my mathematics exam was very poor, and I won't be able to make you proud." And I told him on phone that, look, if I have learned to love you unconditionally, you should learn to be loved without any condition. Why are you so much hard upon yourself? Enjoy your time. Be easy. And then really it helped a lot, and now he did his other examinations very well. So really I had difficult time with him, but now we are so happy. My younger son, Atal Khan, he is not very interested in reading still. Like sometimes we wish and we have these desires that we want to see in our children, and they have different like interests or inclination. Like in Pakistan, when I had a great wish, because Malala was so studious, she was like the most punctual student I have ever seen. And Khushal was very little interested in reading. And one day I said, oh, I wish that I come home. So Turpeke is laughing. I wish, and this is my dream, that one day I come home and I see Khushal reading books. And one day he was just laying on his cot and he had a lot of books and he was reading a book. And Turpeke asked him, oh, you're reading a book? And he said, no, I'm not really reading. I'm making my father's dream come true. I'm making him happy. So, oh my God. So this is how. I think if you befriend them, and as you said, like you mentioned it you articulated it very beautifully, then sons and daughters both, I mean, we have a very beautiful environment and conducive environment. Yeah.
And respect, I think.
And respect is the most important
mutual
thing.
respect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Friendship is one thing. We're told in the US we're not allowed to be friends with our kids.
Yeah, respect is the most important value. You are right. Indeed, yes.
Mike, I think you've said one of the biggest criticisms you get about this work is you're writing about girls and raising daughters, and people say, what about the boys? What is your answer to what about the boys?
Yeah, that always comes up, and I think it comes from a genuine place of fairness. In a lot of times, maybe people haven't really thought so much about the culture and the society we live in and the way we treat girls and boys differently. So they say, well, if you're empowering girls, why don't you empower boys? Let's do both. And it is. It's not an either or. It's a both and situation, because I think they are so connected. We do need to raise and give our daughters agency and voice and power to do good things, to be good people. And we need to do the same and recognize that they're going to grow up into a society where they're underrepresented right now in lots of spheres, if not most spheres, from government to business to sports, or sports being able to play and being shown on TV and movies and films, and not having groups of people vote on what they can and can't do with their own bodies. At the same time, we do shove boys into the man box. Was it Tony Porter from A Call to Men
Yes.
that originated that idea? That we raise boys to not cry, to be real men, whatever that is. There's so many different ways to be a man. And so we can do both of those things at the same time. And if we don't, there's a double-edged sword faced by girls, because if we raise boys to not access their whole emotional selves, it's bad for them. And often, they grow up and become men who turn that just bottled rage on the people we had told them all along are lesser. So we need to do both of those things. And I wrote about daughters because I had been writing about patriarchy and gender bias, and I happen to have a daughter. And we actually have a good friend in our dad's circles who's writing a book about raising empowered boys. Great. I'm all for it. So yeah, we have to do both, and we have to stop buying into the idea that they're not connected in a way and that we can't do both.
I have about 2 hours more of questions, so, but I do want to open it up to the audience. Meetup has a very cool microphone box that we get to throw around. Any of you have questions for either of these guys?
Over here? No? No. Oh, okay. Over here? How does it work? Just speak into here.
Oh, okay. I spend a lot of time with Ziauddin, so I have a question for Mike.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Mike, it was really interesting to hear you talk, and one thing that really struck me about what you said is that you really seemed like you were naturally confident as a dad. You knew you were going to be good at it. So my husband and I are late 30s, early 40s, and we are first-time parents, but we're foster parents. So we've had a 12-year-old girl, and right now we have a 16-year-old girl who's 5 months pregnant. And my husband really loves this, and he believes in it, and he says he feels like he has something in his life now that he didn't have before, but he is not confident about it. He doesn't, like, if I go away to work with Ziauddin for a week, it makes him really nervous, like everything about parenting alone or just parenting when I'm not there for support. So I'm wondering, like, how did you, where does your confidence come from, and what advice would you give to someone who doesn't feel that way yet?
I would love for you to talk to my daughter and see if I'm as competent as I maybe make myself sound. But I do want to hold a little space that I'm not an expert. That sounds like a special thing that's not what I know, being a foster parent in general, being a foster parent with special needs. One of the things of advice I give, and I think I do see a similar dynamic, and it goes more toward dads who kind of write themselves out of it versus wanting to be involved and struggling along the way, which I think every dad here would say, oh yeah, totally. You talk about the patriarchy and you want your son to hop up immediately off the video game and say, yes, I'm coming, because that's what your dad expected of you. I have felt a little bit like that myself. And so to hear groups of dads get together and talk about parenting challenges, that's empowering, and it builds the confidence. So I would say definitely, I'm sure there's parenting groups, especially for foster parent needs. I find dad groups incredibly helpful just to talk about these challenges. But the dynamic that goes toward the kind of the bumbling dad who's checked out on his own, I can't clean the house by myself. What do I do if my partner goes away for the weekend? I always say you have to go away more. I mean, that's just unacceptable. You're an adult, you've joined this partnership. What are you doing? Like, that's not okay any longer. You may have thought that was okay. Your buddies might think that's okay. You may see TV commercials that say, like, yeah, I can't change a diaper. This is not okay. So I'd recommend each time If you can't afford to go to Vegas for a weekend, go to a friend's house and watch Netflix for the weekend. And just say, you're going to have to get used to this because we're in this together, and that's just unacceptable.
This is do you watch This Is Us? It's a TV show. The family has a foster daughter, and part of it seems to be just time. Like all of you need time to get used to the situation, and you can't. It's not like you have a newborn baby, and the hardest things are changing diapers and bath time and that kind of stuff. These are challenges that nobody has faced before. Then he has a lot to learn from you. Other questions?
You've both talked about allowing your kids to be themselves and stuff, but I'm sure both of you have come across moments where you find yourself superimposing your own personal wants and desires on your kids, and how do you keep that in check for yourself?
You are an expert, you first. I'm just a father and you are an expert.
I call that the soccer dad syndrome, and I see that all the time, and guilty as charged. I think actually I carry an incredible amount of shame because I think I ruined soccer to an extent for my daughter because I wanted so much for her to be able to play maybe in the way I would play. Do this, do that, let's train, why aren't you doing this? So I think that's definitely a thing that we have to recognize that maybe we'll do. Like, I expect this to go a certain way, and maybe it doesn't meet my expectations. I think we always have to hold a little space for that. And you could see it on the soccer fields and sports field. You know, sports ball, parents screaming, dads a lot of times screaming at their kids to do X, Y, or Z. Yeah, it's a struggle, but especially as they grow older and say, enough, stop, I'm my own person, I don't like it, I'm gonna go do something else. I wish I had learned that lesson maybe a few years earlier, but it's something that's kind of, you know, we're all walk around with little biases, and I think that's one that hit me and I had to work on.
And you, sir?
Yeah, I had so many occasions in my life that when, like, I wished something done by my children, and then, I mean, this is your question, am I right?
Yes.
And then I learn this through their reaction that, okay, I should not impose myself. Like one thing that when Malala used to give speeches in Urdu, in English, in Pakistan for the cause of education. So I don't know if I was very crazy about it, that I used to tell her, okay, this couplet in Urdu, when you finish your speech, just read it. You understand? Like the speech, usually she used to go to the stage and speak extempore, like from her heart. But I had a wish that she should read these Urdu lines. And she hardly did that. When she come back from the stage, used to tell me, oh, I forgot it. So then I told to myself, why should I say to her if she doesn't like poetry that much? I'm a poet, a little bit poet in Pashto. I write in my mother tongue. So being a poet, I was very interested in poetry, and I wanted her to be interested in poetry. But she does not like I can't say she does not like poetry, but I can say that she is not interested in poetry. She's more about like articulating her ideas and her words. You have heard of, yeah. So I mean, and the same is about my sons. Like they teach us that we should not like intrude too much or pose too much things on them. So one day I told my younger son that when I was a son like you, and my father used to call me from the lawn of the home, and I was playing on the rooftop. We had like mud house, and the mud houses together like made a playground. You can imagine it. So when my father used to call me Ziauddin, so with Ziauddin, it's my name. With Din, I would have been down in the house. And now you are upstairs in your rooms, and I call you Khushal, Athal, come down, and you don't come down. And you see, when I went to Athal and I said him that, look, Athal, I was this kind of son, and you're not coming down. And I'm calling you. And he's so cheeky. He told me now the times have changed. Now, listen. And he was very cheeky, okay? He was not rude. Now, listen, time is different. Now, you are in my room, and when I say, Ziauddin, you have to be out of this room. I laughed. I laughed. Anyway.
One more.
I answered your question. I just say an anecdote. I don't know.
Thank you.
So, anyway.
Where's the box? Throw it to my. Oh, do you have a question?
Ready?
No, I do. I actually have a very similar question to the one that was just asked. I'm curious how each of you parent through fear, like wanting to protect your daughter from physical harm, emotional harm, fear of them losing their equestrian tournament or whatever it is. I'm just curious what your advice would be to parent through that fear.
Again, you are an expert.
There's a really good book by Lisa Damore.
Like, if you rephrase your question, I want to. Like fear.
Like fear of, sorry? Your own fear of your daughter or your sons
Yeah.
being harmed, both physically, emotionally, in some way, but still allowing them, not clipping their wings and letting them go, despite that fear you might have.
That fear feels like it's omnipresent, especially knowing that you're going to have a daughter in America who is going to be targeted for sexual assaults at rates that boys are not, especially as she goes to college in search of education. The likelihood goes up. So yeah, there's a fear there, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, to start having these conversations. There's a really great book by Jessica Bennett called The Feminist Fight Club, and it's this guidebook for women as they enter the workforce, how to handle the patriarchy and biases you're going to encounter in the workforce. And I thought that's great. It's a fabulous book. But wouldn't it be so fabulous if dads got together and had that discussion long before these women left college and entered the workforce, when they were little kids? So knowing that that fear is there and recognizing that, what can happen, it gave me some semblance of maybe control or power to start having those conversations, to change circles of dads and men along the way, but knowing full well that I need to empower her, and we need to change from the beginning, long before she gets to that age, the society that she's going to grow up in. Because depending on your race, your sexual orientation, your age, it's going to be quite different from you. So yeah, that fear is omnipresent, for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I wish we maybe talked a little bit more about what's on the line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing this question for the first time, really, and I and my wife have a different kind of fear. I mean, and that is like, we have seen the worst trauma in our life. A daughter who was like, not just a daughter, she is my comrade, my friend. I call her Jani, soulmate, and she had almost taken away from us. It's a miracle that she is living and she is existing on this planet. We have always a little bit fear that, God forbid, it's always there. But our children help us. In our case, with one example, I can tell you that Malala is blessed with such a resilience and courage and bravery that she removes our fear with her determination. And when we went to Pakistan last year, and this fear, fear which I had and Torpike had in our hearts and minds, and we were not very willing to go. We wanted to go, but again, it's very to be and not to be, like Hamlet, what to do. And she was the person that I told her that, the situation in Pakistan is not ideal to go back, and it's a bit difficult. Let's have more political stability. And she told me, no. If you wait for that, it will take too long. We have to go, and I will go. And it was her determination that we all went there. So the beautiful thing in fear is togetherness, the wholeness of the family. We are human beings. We all get scared. We all have fear. And fear is the worst feeling human beings can have. Fear is the worst feeling. Fear to be harmed, fear to be harassed, fear to be like your property is taken away from you, fear of to be dishonored, all these fears. There is a verse in the Holy Quran. I'm not very religious guy, but I love that verse. And it says that, like it tells that God gave the people of Mecca like peace in fear. Like it tells that opposite to fear is peace. So the real peace is not the absence of war, it is the absence of fear. You understand? Like, so this is how like fear is there, but the wholeness of the family, if I feel fear, Torpeka is there. If she feels fear, I'm there. If Ushal has some fear, we are all there. Atal has problem, Malala has problem. And fear, and to share the fear is important. When you share the fear, it's gone. It comes down. But if you keep it with yourself, it enlarges and it multiplies. So, yeah. So we help one another, and it helps a lot. Yes. About the boys, my fear is like in the UK, there are like teenagers, they go after like things, hashish and those things, what that is called, weeds and stuff. So our fear is, oh, if our boys are out, what they will be doing and who they will be in company with. So we take care of them, how much we can do, and we sit with them and we have this conversation with them. But Atal, one day I told him that you go out and you meet these people, and I don't know your friends, who they are. Would you like to tell me, like, and again, he's very cheeky. He said, have you ever asked me when you meet your friends? But he's a good boy. He said, don't worry, I'm a good boy, and I'll be fine. I will not go to the people who are like, anyway. So fear is always there, different fears for different parents, as you mentioned. Yeah.
First, I'd like to thank everyone here for coming and sharing their stories. They've been very enlightening. So I live in sort of this liberal bubble that I guess I've curated myself, or has kind of been curated on its own. And I'm not sure if others here are also in these like liberal bubbles. But we have these conversations around, women's rights and sort of, gender equality, et cetera, pretty frequently. But I'm sure there's other bubbles that are not so liberal that are not having these conversations. So if you had to think of one thing that we could all do to potentially influence or impact those not so liberal bubbles, what would that be to really move the needle?
The expert father first. Yeah.
So I'm from San Francisco.
If you rephrase his question.
So we have Republicans and Democrats, one very conservative, one very liberal, factions of political parties. And geographically we're split up, where maybe the coastal areas might be generally considered more liberal, and the states that they even call the flyover states, because you can fly over them from one area to the other, are more conservative. And how do we reach bubbles that necessarily don't look like our own? Is that it?
Yeah, for the most part, our circles are friends, and we tend to surround ourselves with like-minded folks. And I'm assuming that a lot of folks here are more liberal, and therefore have surrounded themselves with folks that think about women's rights and gender equality. But I'm sure there's other groups that don't think about those things and don't have those conversations, which we may or may not have access to. And if there's one thing that you guys could think of that could impact that narrative that's going on or not going on in those circles, what would that be?
There's a really neat kind of bifurcation in pop culture and politics. Where in pop culture, thanks to the amplification of social media, some things are okay culturally, and some things are not okay any longer culturally. Politically, it's okay for 63 million people to go ahead and give the stamp of approval for grab them by the genitals. Like that type of thing is politically okay. Culturally, that type of movie or representation doesn't really happen so much. And so I really think that social media, people kind of complain about social justice warriors kind of saying their voice on social media, but it's been shown to have like a tremendous impact in moving culture. And so if we're not geographically close to bubbles that are different from our own, it's a great way to listen to voices that are not our own and put out what's acceptable in our society. And it does move the needle. I think of two quick things. That social media had a profound impact on Star Wars. I love Star Wars, the movie Star Wars. The latest to come out showed, like, yay, this is the very first of the new ones, showed a black and white picture of all the Star Wars cast. And it was all the Star Wars people, and there was something like 25 men and 2 women. Social media went to town on it. And you might think, oh, it's just people angrily typing away at their keyboards, but they changed the culture in that a lot of characters were then written into it before it was actually started. Captain Phasma being one of them I can think of off the top of my head, but even more background characters that typically you don't see in movies are represented in that film, and it's only gotten better in terms of gender and racial representation in that. Huggies is another one where they showed kind of the doofy dad who can't change diapers. Dad groups got together and said, culturally, that's no longer okay. And it's been shown that that type of social media activism helps move our pop culture and what's okay. And I'm hoping to get to your question of how to speak to groups that maybe politically are different than our own. I guess you have to take it upon yourself to talk. I always feel some bit of, why don't you talk to me? So that's present there as well. But there is a tremendous power in listening to voices that have always kind of been underrepresented, and then also changing the culture through online activism. Marches certainly help. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I've seen what works in changing the culture for the better, and that's certainly one of them.
I think meeting up, we're at meetup groups. I think there's this great opportunity for people to meet in real life around one particular interest. Ours is we're all fathers. We're not all liberal fathers. We're not all gay fathers. We're not all any kind of father. You come to a meetup, certainly the goal is to have dads of all stripes and be welcoming to all types of dads. And we don't set ourselves up to bash each other, but inevitably we're going to start to learn about each other. And a gay dad that comes to a meetup might be the first gay dad that a whole other group of dads might have met for the first time. So I think across meetup groups, you guys have really created something here that gives an opportunity for people to get together in real life and break off of social media. Social media is great in many ways, but the connections in real life and actually having experiences with people, talking to people directly rather than being behind the computer talking all the time, I think gets us a little bit of the way there. So thank you, Meetup.
Well played.
We have come to the end of our time. We have books available for sale, and I think you guys are both willing to sign those books if anybody happens to want to buy one, or if you have one. Both gentlemen are going to be sitting at the table. Please stick around. Meetup has a refrigerator full of refreshments for us, a table full of refreshments for us. Thank you again to the